Hi, everybody. We are joining you for a special segment of Sochi's Sunday Devotion. And it's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be a devotion. We are doing something different today. I am going to be interviewing the leadership team that God has placed in my path for Remarkable. And the first guest that I'm going to be interviewing is none other than my beloved, my handsome, Stephen Elmore. So if you're out there, just give him a round of applause right there where you're at, because this is like gonna be my favorite interview, because this is my Stephen. And I'm sorry that I get he makes me laugh and he doesn't even know why, but he makes me smile, and I'm very, very thankful for him. So like I said, this is going to be a little bit different. He is going to be the first one out of 7, I think, interviews that are going to come between now and our next Remarkable date, which is Friday, September 14th, 2018.
Man, let this be a lesson to you about hanging out with a pretty girl, because they'll ask you to do things and you'll be like, yeah, sure. And then later you'll be like, what happened? What did I just do? What did I sign up for?
So if you have any questions throughout this segment, you could ask them. This is your chance to ask the Stephen Elmore. Like I said, I'm super, super excited. I got some questions. He did look over the questions, so he is a little bit prepared. Don't let him fool you. But we're just gonna talk like we're talking to each other and just be as real as we can. If you know Stephen or me personally, you know that we are just real people. We love to laugh. We love to have a great time. And one of the things that is the biggest place in our heart is Jesus Christ. And the reason that we love each other so much is because Jesus is in our heart. Amen. So he is going to share this on his personal page really quick.
I'm putting it on there so that it'll share from there. I think that worked. We'll find out later if it didn't.
So the first question I'm going to ask you, Stephen, I know you, but I want you to tell Facebook world, especially the Remarkable people that follow our page and the people that are going to see this video on the playback, because I believe a lot of people are going to see this testimony. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am the youngest of 4. Mm-hmm. I have an older brother and 2 older sisters. So it's sister, brother, sister, and then me.
The baby.
And my mom is very fond of introducing me as the baby, even though I tower over her now. She still loves to call me the baby when she introduces me. Mom can attest to that and say it's true.
But I mean, all of them, you're the biggest one out of all of them, the tallest one.
That's true. Mm-hmm. I am the tallest of all the 4 siblings. So, and my journey's definitely been a little bit different than Sochi's. I do not have a pastor for a father, and my parents were not fortunate enough to stick it out to the long run. And so when I was probably 7 years old, I think, my parents got divorced, and they let me choose who I was going to live with. And so I decided in my 7-year-old brain that I would live with Mom during the school year, because she was, I thought a little more responsible. Again, 7-year-old thinking here. And that Dad liked to go to the woods and might be more fun in the summer. And so that's what we did. And that's how I grew up through those younger years. Was not always easy, and I'm sure I was not always easy. My sister Tabby could tell you some stories that you would not believe, but are most likely true. And then when I was about 15 or 16, my mom said she was going to move to Memphis. And I just couldn't wrap my head around that. I've always been in Florida, and I thought Memphis was just going to be hillbillies and Elvis, and I said no, I think I'm going to try and stay here. And I went to live with my grandmother in Umatilla, and which is north of here for those not familiar, north of where we are right now. And so I finished high school there, and I went to community college and met this beautiful girl there who liked to tease me, and I started a new life with her. So.
Okay, so let's go back to 7 year. You think you were around 7 years old?
I think I was around 7.
When Stephen tells me this story, or when we have talked about it, I always try to think about like what a 7-year-old goes through, and we always think about Jude. Like that's our frame of reference for everything. Like when I think about the years that we've been at certain places, I'm like, okay, Jude's 10, so we've been there 5 years or whatever. That's how my reference is.
Right.
And so when I think about a 7-year-old Jude, like that breaks my heart, because for any child to go through that with the divorce, because parents and I know that sometimes it's just inevitable, but I think a lot of times like the kids are the ones that really, really suffer the most, and they're the ones that are trying to hold it together. And for you to say, I just did what was best. Like I decided to live with my mom. They let me choose. And
right.
One of the things that you all also are very fond of are those summers, and how your dad and I want you to tell this, how every no, it was not even the summers, it was like every other weekend, right?
Right. Yeah. So the I dreamt I would be spending my summers swimming in lakes and running through the forest, and that was not really how it was, because
he lives in like not.
I lived in the city,
right? When
I lived in with my mom, she always lived in the cities because she was a nurse, and I found her work there. And my dad lived more out in the woods. It's almost in the Ocala National Forest, right. And he bought some property out there, and but Dad had to work in the summers. So really, when I came on the summers, I really didn't spend a whole bunch of time with my dad. I spent more of it with my sister Tabby and my grandma.
Right.
And they're really the ones that I got to spend my summers with, and with my 2 cousins, Brian and Kevin, who really were like my brothers. They actually were brothers. Brian was older than me, and Kevin was younger than me. Right. And we would pal around and see how much trouble we could get into before my sister Tabby, who had 2 twins of her own by that point, 'cause she's older, before she could figure out how to bail us out. So that's what my summers consisted of. But I got into some trouble. I started
Before you do that, I want to talk about how your dad, he would come every other weekend to pick you up. I'm sorry. Say, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I got in some trouble. I started getting into some fights at school, and my mom, she said, I really think that your dad needs to come and see you more often. So she talked to him in her motherly way and informed him that he needed to come every 2 weeks. So every other weekend, he would drive 2 hours to come and pick me up. And he would take me to his house for the weekend, and we would spend the weekend together. And then he would drive me the 2 hours back home for school, and on Monday. And I don't even remember what we did all the time on the weekends. But what stands out to me was the conversations that we had when we were just driving on the 2-hour drives.
So important.
I remember the day that because we used to always hit McDonald's on the way back. And it was kind of like the highlight, right? Yeah. The one in Leesburg. We'd stop by the mall. If he had some change, we'd go to the arcade. We'd go to McDonald's, and then he'd drive me back. And I remember the day he said, I don't think you can have a Happy Meal anymore. You're getting too big for that. And I was like, whoa.
Something you remember.
I'm growing up, like the little milestones in life. And now, we talk about at church all the time about breaking generational curses. And it sounds like something wonderful. Right. It sounds like, oh, well, that's what happens in other families because, my family's kind of normal. Well, my family was normal, but that's a generational curse. Most of my family's divorced. Most of my family comes from divorced homes. And now Jude is just turned 10. And I can say, well, I broke a generational curse. Like he made it farther than I did with 2 whole parents. He still gets to see us argue, just like I got to see my mom and dad argue. But he's got 2 parents who are like, you can argue all you want, but and you can leave if you want. Just pack me a bag because I'm going to go with you.
Right. This is therapeutic. We don't even know, huh, Papa? But it's so good because I'm hoping that people that are watching, that will watch later on, and we'll see that no matter how because Stephen does do different things in the church and leadership, but we don't know the background of most people and what they've been through, right. And that definitely just kind of rocked his world at 7 years old, but that affected him all along. But one thing that you will never forget, and that was one of the most special memories, is your dad, making that effort to come every other weekend and spend that time.
Right.
And those were some of the greatest talks. And I know that he tries to do that with Jude as well. But one thing that stands out to me is the influence that Stephen's grandma had on him. And I thank God for grandmas. I have two great grandmas, one that's already in heaven, and she had a huge influence on me. But Stephen's grandma, in fact, everybody probably in your family has lived with her at one point of their life. She was that one person that when everybody else gave up on somebody, she never gave up on them. And I'm so thankful for grandmas like that, for Grandma Jewel that is in heaven. And she's like her head is so heavy from that crown that's on her head, from all the from all the jewels, because she's a jewel. Her name is Velma Jewel. But she told Stephen, if you're gonna live in my house, you're gonna go to church. And so that was one thing that he did. They went back to his roots, First Baptist Church of Altoona.
I had to go to church. I had to mow the yard. Right. I had chores. I had to she taught me to wash my own clothes, right. and a bunch of the things that my mom did for me that I think I took for granted completely. And I was doing more on my own at that age than a lot of kids already, and sort of watching out for my niece that was living with us. But nothing like when I went to live with Granny. Granny told me this is what you're gonna have to do on your own if you're gonna live and make it. Right. So what's your next question?
Okay, so now you want to talk about, you know what? Let's do this. And I'm going to try and steer this question so that you can tell a little bit about how we met. Because if you don't know us personally, we have such a great story. Mm-hmm. Something that it just reminds me how much God loves us. And you know how you're like, I know God loves me. And we sing that song. But like, he loves us. He's got such it's so intricate, the plan that he has for us, right. And it starts at the beginning. So the next question is, when did you see a specific point when you saw God make your mark on your life? And I'm going to steer that around how we met.
Sure. So, this is a really long story, but I'm going to give you the shorter version of it. Basically, I was interested in going to an art school, and went and previewed a couple of art schools. I've always enjoyed art.
Umatilla High School is where he went to.
Right, Umatilla High. Right. And my dad said, I'd love for you to go to this school, but if you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it on your own. Mm-hmm. So then I made up my mind, well, I'm probably not going anywhere. I don't have the money to do that. And I never had anybody speak life in a way that we do now, as a commonplace. Right. Saying that you can go to school, and I just thought, well, then I'm not going to go anywhere. I can't go anywhere. And I was senior class and student government president, and I had a guidance counselor come to me, and she was like, you get a full scholarship to Lake Sumter. And I said, yeah, but I want to go to this art school, and that's the community college, and it's, people, I don't want to go there. And she said, well, just fill out the application in case things fall through. Well, fast forward a few months, I wasn't going to go to the art school. And they had accepted me to Lake Sumter on a full scholarship because of my involvement. And so I started going to Lake Sumter and met some friends, and actually was really a good thing for me because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And why should you pay 3 times as much if you don't know what you want to do? Right. So I went to community college. I got my 2-year degree, and while I was there, I did meet a beautiful young lady, like I said, who liked to make fun of me. And we will not.
We don't even have to go through that whole story.
We won't get into that. We'll save that. We'll save that for our close friends who probably have heard it. But we got together, and so I decided, that I needed to get home. I know. Okay. See, you're getting it all on camera. It's live. Yeah. I decided I wanted to introduce her to my family and start with my grandma, because that's where I was living at the time. Right. At this point, I was 18 and had not lived with either parent since I was about 15, and I've been living with Granny. And so I went home, and I wanted to tell my grandma in advance. I had not. I think she had only met one girl I'd ever dated, and I'd never brought anybody home to meet her. And so I wanted to to tell her a little bit about her before I brought her home. And so when I was trying to tell her, she kind of got a puzzled look, and she was looking at me, and she's like, "Is her name Sochi Ramirez?" And I said, "Yeah." And my first tip off should have been that she said her name right, because she's an older Southern woman, and Sochi's name is a little different. If she said her name right, and she said, "Is her dad named Felix?" And I said, "Well, I think so. I haven't met him yet," because, again, we hadn't gone home to meet the families. And she said, "I just love the Ramirez family. You can date her as long as you want." So we came to find out that...
And, of course, I didn't know anything.
Right.
I did not know Miss Jewel or anything.
Right. So it came to find out that the church that I grew up in, that my whole family had gone to, First Baptist Church of Altoona, the pastor there years ago had decided that there were enough migrant farm workers that he wanted to make sure they could get somebody who could minister to them in their language. So they went and found a young Spanish pastor to use the old sanctuary at the same time the church was going on, and they went and bussed the migrant farm workers in on the church buses so that he could preach to them. And that pastor that they found was a very young, still black-haired Felix Ramirez.
Yeah.
So my grandmother, she knew that family. And we had been in the nursery together at First Baptist Church of Altoona, and had not known each other our whole lives. Didn't go to school together. We don't think crossed paths. Maybe a county fair or something like that, but we didn't run in the same circles.
Right.
And then we ran into each other at community college, and ended up together.
So we were probably in the nursery for a good 2 years, at least 2 years.
At least 2 years.
After that, I'm not trying to put it out on me because this is about Stephen, but after that, my dad ended up going to being called to Mascot, and to the church, Hillcrest Baptist Church, where he served as a Spanish minister there, and then he started La Primera. But it's really cool because there is a picture of Stephen's dad and my dad. My dad's holding me, Stephen's dad's holding him, and they're standing right next to each other in line. They're holding us because we're like little toddlers. Yeah. But Stephen always says, like, he remembers a girl pulling his hair. So
a cute little brown-haired girl
which I doubt because I was super, super shy. But that's just a really cool story. So we've knew each other for so long, but we didn't know each other. Our families knew. And then, of course, my dad, when I said Elmore, he knew, of course, who the Elmores were. So that was a really cool story about how God set us apart, 30 years. No, that was 20 years before we had even met, technically knew each other. Right. So
that's an example of really him being just good to us, and showing his mark, because I still say, short of deciding to ask Christ into my life, this is the best thing I've ever done.
Right.
So.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, when did you come to know Christ in a personal way? Because your family was in the church, even though they did have some stuff going on, like everybody. Mm-hmm. But when did you come to know, where it wasn't Miss Granny Jewel's relationship or your mom's? When did you come to know Jesus?
Well, my mom had always attended church,
right, and
almost always made me go to church.
And mega churches.
And always really big churches that had a lot of programs. So I've been in every church, from the smallest, 50 people church, into something with, 500, 600 people in it. Especially when we lived in Brandon, in the Tampa area. There's some large churches over there, and but it wasn't personal. It wasn't my thing. I mean, I've just been in church my whole waking life, to say it like Pastor Tony. So it wasn't for me. It was just, I was forced to go there. And I remember we were going to have this big, youth revival, and they brokered this deal with Hungry Howie's and brought an entire semi-full of Hungry Howie's pizza, and they were giving out all these free tickets. So I got a stack of these free tickets, and I went to my, I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. Anyways, I went to my school, and I was trying to sell these tickets. I'd cut off the part that was free, and I was trying to sell these free tickets.
Yeah. And
then one of my friends who found out what I was doing, he was like, "Hey, you're selling those tickets?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Are you going to go to that event?" And he said, he said, and I said, well, yeah, it's at my church. My mom's gonna make me go. He's like, but when they get there, they're gonna find out it was a free event. And luckily at that point I had not sold any of the tickets. Nobody was taking me up on the all-you-can-eat pizza offer that I had given them. And so I went to this event, and they were talking about Christ, and I felt moved for the first time in an individual way. And he said, and it was very Baptist, eyes closed, hands up if you want to know the Lord, and it's your personal Lord and Savior. So I did that, and then he said amen, and everybody opened their eyes, and he said, all right, now I'm going to ask you to do something. If you raised your hand when we had our eyes closed, I want you to come forward. And I was like, I knew I shouldn't have raised my hand, and I didn't move. I'm like, I ain't moving. People started moving. I'm like, I'm not moving. And then the guy implored again. He's like, there's some of you that I know raised your hands and you didn't. Now this is a huge church now, like 500-600 kids in this auditorium. Wow. And he said, I know there's some of you that raised your hand and you haven't come forward. But you are. Christ is not. He was not ashamed of you. What he did for you was big, and wow. And I know you're scared, but if you're not ashamed of him,
right,
just start moving a little bit and come forward. And I was like, man, this guy got me. And I felt hoodwinked a little bit, but I went forward, and that really was the beginning of my faith journey, as it were.
There was one person that you told me that you don't have to say who, but when you were excited when you came home and you're like, I accepted Jesus, and you felt like that spiritual high, like a lot of times we do. We come from this special ceremony or a special camp or worship service, and we feel like I can change the world for Jesus, and you just feel like that,
Right.
And this one person was like, kind of dampened your spirits,
Yeah, it was right before summer break,
right.
And then I went to stay with my dad, and I was on just like she said, just a spiritual high, and was so hopeful for the future and what that meant. Mm-hmm. And one of my family members said, in a very sarcastic way, described what I was feeling, and then said, it's just a feeling. It'll go away, you'll see, and then you'll be just like the rest of us. And my dad really got onto him and was like, don't you talk to him that way, and really got after him. But it dampened my spirits a little bit, and I was like, well, was it real? I think it was real. And then like any young person that I think accepts the Lord, you start to have all these questions, and I'm a very matter of fact, black or white, analytical person, except for when it comes to me. Then I can negotiate away 1,000 shades of gray. But for everybody else, it's black or white. That's it. You can ask my friends. They don't ask me unless they really want to know, because I'm going to tell you if you ask. And that kind of started me saying, well, was it real? Is it real?
Right.
Are you there? Am I by myself? And I struggled with that for a long time. For many years I did.
One thing that is so important when you say that is that words are so powerful, like we always say. And it's so crucial that when people do make that decision, that people do encourage them, because they are going to have these naysayers that start speaking negatives in their life. And that's why a lot of people fall away from the Lord, and they don't keep that consistent walk. But as we know, and we believe, what the scripture says is that once you ask Jesus in your heart, that's it. It's not something that you ever lose it.
Right.
Thank God for that, because we may stray away, but God is always going to keep on pulling at our heart. And thank the
Amen.
Lord, because that you did have some rough years. Even I'm just calling you out there.
Remember, gentlemen,
throughout high school, that there were some decisions that he made, but then when you got to college, and I remember he didn't have he used to just didn't have a good clean mouth.
This lady's talking about how she called me out.
Right.
We started talking friendlier, and
right.
She was like, well, I don't think this is going to work out because I go to church.
Right.
And I'm like, well, whatever, I go to church.
Yeah.
She's like, you don't go to church. I'm like, I'm in church every Sunday.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, you can't be in church. I said, besides, you're just Catholic. It isn't. Yeah. And she was like, Catholic? I'm Baptist. And I was like, what?
That's how
I've never known. And at that
you
point,
are getting like the real
in my
side
small
of
town
us.
life, I
Right.
had never met anybody Spanish who wasn't Catholic.
Right.
So I thought that was like a thing, right? Okay. And so I found out she was Southern Baptist, and this is all before we found out that her dad was the pastor, the Spanish pastor of the church that I was currently attending every Sunday. But I hung out with some friends that had really terrible mouths, and we all cussed a lot. Right. And she was like, "Well, I don't think you are because of the way you speak." Right. And I was like, "This she's watching me." Right. You know, and she's grading my character based on my actions, and I was convicted because she was right. I wasn't living up to what I said I was. Right.
And just who you surround yourself matters, and it's just because, when you're around certain kind of people, they either bring the good or the bad out of you. And it's so important what decisions you make about who you allow yourself. So that doesn't only go for teenagers, that goes for adults, children, and we're very particular about who we let our children hang around with. We don't just let them hang around just anybody, because those characteristics, they rub off on our kids. But the same thing for us. We always want our kids to be, well behaved and just people that...
Also the same with the TV shows. I think I used to talk about TV and say it was my third parent, my best friend, and my confidant. Because I spent a lot of years where I was by myself. I was a latchkey kid, and I had a sister who had some problems. My mom spent a lot of years trying to chase her down and save her. And I spent a lot of years by myself. And I think we underestimate the power. We can't say TV anymore because it's media. Right. It's games. It's phones. It's wherever your child is spending that giant amount of time at. We have to look at that and say, is that a good influence? Right. And when they're little and you think they're not paying attention, we banned Caillou at our house because that kid cries all the time. He's a whiny baby on that show. Yes, and once Jude watched a couple of them, we're like, nope, no more Caillou because he was starting to act like Caillou. That's
a simple but really specific way, But hey, Dion and Rob, thank you for watching. So what are you doing right now that you can see the power of that you are able to make your mark? Like, tell us a little about where you are right now. Maybe job, spirit life.
I mean, so many things that God is really allowing me to do, and it starts at church, starts at Hope International with Pastor Tony and Pastor Jody. Right. They've put me in a leadership role, which I never thought I would be in, never had any desire to be in. Hey, what's up, Rob? Never had a desire to be in at all. But he saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, And I lead up the stewardship team and try to keep that going in a great way to bring God glory. I'm on a team of people that really are trying to encourage men together in that Compass group. And then I do a lot for the kingdom at work as well. A couple years ago, I was working 5 different part-time jobs, trying to make ends meet. We had made the decision for Sochi to stay home and take care of Jude.
Before Evelyn was born.
Yeah, before Evelyn was born. And God had blessed us. Evelyn was about to be born, and I thought, man, I've got to make a change. Right. For one, I was wearing myself out. I thought if this new baby doesn't sleep, I'm gonna die. Yeah. So I knew I had to make a change because of that. But I also knew it was too much, and that I was not letting God do things for me. So I started to do less and started to make more. It didn't make sense, but I think that was a growth process with trusting God. Right. And then eventually, I got an opportunity to work at another church. So the First United Methodist Church in Claremont, Florida, needed a business administrator, and somebody who knew Sochi reached out to her and said, hey, my church is looking for a business administrator, and I think your husband should put his resume in. Right. She didn't know Sochi well. She barely knew me. I mean, knew my name, but didn't know me. but something had prompted her to tell me to apply, and it did take 4 months.
Yeah.
Methodist they're very slow. They had an interim while they were looking.
There's a lot of committees.
A lot of committees that things have to go through. And when I got that job, in the span of one day, I went from multiple jobs, not really making enough, to having one job where I made more than I had made previously, and had benefits and all these things that people, are really struggling to get even today.
Right.
And at a church that was growing and looking for someone to help them. And so even though I'm not doing any ministry there, like I'm not on the ministry side, I pay their bills, I hire people, I fire people, I do the logistics of things there.
Human resources.
But like, if I do my job right, then the pastors have less to worry about and can focus on the Bible and focus on congregational care and focus on missions. And I like to think that has made a big impact for the kingdom just through my daily work in a very unique way that I never could have seen that I was going to get to do.
That's so cool, because as many people know that I graduated from the Baptist College of Florida, a college that's
where Jeremy Grant went. What's up, man?
Hey, Jeremy. Where we, that's something that you love, the college too, even though you didn't go there. But it was very small college that we loved, and when people think about ministry, people that knew me, that Sochi's gonna always do full-time ministry, but they never looked at. I don't think they never looked at Stephen like that, and I believe that his job is full-time.
ministry. The heathen who would visit,
but he is now, This is just an encouragement for all those that think that what people think or may say about you is not true. You got to believe what God says about you, because my husband is a godly man and he doesn't have to prove that to anybody. Like this, it doesn't make sense for him to be working there. It's just the Holy Spirit that opened the door for him, and he is making a big difference. You are making your mark at the Methodist Church. I know you're being a huge blessing to them. So let's get about. I want you to tell us a little bit about like what verse or what Bible story really impacts you. Because there's a lot of people that say Philippians 4:13 or Jeremiah 20:11, or I like this story about Paul. But what's a story or a verse that you really like?
So when you get to know us a little better, you'll soon find out that my Sochi is like Susie Bible study. She knows the word. Oh my gosh, I'm envious. But it's not just because she has a photographic memory, which she almost nearly does, especially with names. It's because she puts the work in, and she's in the Word, and that's how she continually has the Word come to her. And where I'm more story driven, so like I'm not the guy that's going to be quoting verses at you. I'm not even going to know where it's at. Yeah. I'd have to like Google it to figure out where it's at. But I'm the guy.
But God will give you the words to say when you need them.
She always says that.
Yeah, he does.
But I am the guy that thinks of the story that applies to the situation,
right.
And so for me, it's really story based, which is I think why me and Jesus get along, because that's how he would communicate with people, right? And I like that sometimes. Storyteller. My friends tell me too long a story.
But they're great stories.
But they're great. Yeah. They are.
Yeah.
So
details and everything.
So one of my favorite characters is King David, and so many great stories. When he slayed Goliath, the stories that they tell about David's great men, how they fought through enemy lines to go get him some water, because he said he wanted some water from the main hometown, and then when they brought it back, he wouldn't even drink it because he said it's not fair because all my men can't have a drink of water as well. But one that really stands out to me, and it stands out because of a sermon that I heard. I think Jensen Franklin actually was the one who did the sermon, but he was telling the story about how King David was in a cave, and he's hiding out from Solomon, and Solomon's like searching the mountains. Saul. Yeah. And Saul's searching the mountains looking for him to kill him, And so Saul goes into this cave to relieve himself. Mm-hmm. And then another time he's also in there sleeping in a cave, and his mighty men go and tell him. Tell David. They're like, hey, he's in the cave by himself. Mm-hmm. We can all go in there together, or we know you can take him. Go in and kill him. And he was like, no, I cannot touch God's anointed.
Wow.
God has anointed me, but he made him king first.
Wow.
And so he went in there and he got close enough to lift his cloak up and cut a piece of the cloak off. And then later, when Saul was screaming out for him from a high place, he called to him and said, "This is some of your cloak. I could have killed you, but I don't want that." And Jensen Franklin really talked about how that was an example of his integrity. How so many of us, our biggest temptation. A lot of people think of King David, they think of, his faults. They think of Bathsheba and they think of that as his greatest temptation. And I don't think that was his greatest temptation. I think it was his greatest failure. But Jensen Franklin says your greatest temptation comes when you feel justified. And so how justified should King David have felt? He had been anointed. He'd been on the run.
Right.
Saul had been trying to kill him, and all he'd ever tried to do was help him.
Right.
And so there he was right there in his grasp. He could have killed him, and he didn't. And so he passed this great test, this great temptation. And I desire to be a man like that, that could, pass that test. When I feel justified,
that's right. Yep.
To be able to say, no, that's not what I'm going to do.
That's so good. That is so good. Makes me want to go read that story again.
Jensen Franklin, man, look it up.
So
he's
good.
fantastic.
Yeah, he's so good. But I mean, just the word, that whole story. So, what are some great people that you feel have had an impact on your life, whether it be mentors, friends? I don't know. Who has made an impact on you?
So many people.
Right.
So many people, but probably the biggest impact mentor-wise in my young spiritual life was my youth minister at the time that I moved back to Umatilla, was Henry Willingham. Special shout out to my friend Randy who helped me earlier today. Yeah. But Henry Willingham was my youth pastor then, and he would just talk to us. He would talk to us through stories, and he would let us ask questions, and really let us ask the things that we were wondering about. And we would have real world discussions, and that really helped me as someone who always speculated and just had all these questions. That really was important to me to help me grow in my faith.
So let me stop you there, because youth ministers are so important.
So important.
So 20 years later, that's one of the first people that you think had a huge impact on you.
Right.
Was pastor or youth minister Henry. So youth ministers out there, you are doing great work, and be encouraged that what you do is not taken lightly. The Lord sees you, the parents see you, and most of all, the youth see you, and you are making a difference. Even if it's 2 people in the youth that show up on those Wednesday nights, keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference. Because I remember you guys didn't always have a big youth group, but Henry always showed up, and Stephen would always show up.
All my years of high school, we always had 5 or 6 people.
Right.
It's a small church.
And so, if you're not having those big, 20, 30, 50 people come, continue what you're doing. Do not grow weary in doing good. Please, youth ministers, you are making a huge difference.
Probably the next set of people, besides family and besides my wife, that have made a big, impact on me and my life spiritually, really is, we call them the boys. There were a couple of guys that we made friends with at her college, the preacher boys, and they spent a lot of time with us. They spent a lot of time, just being our friends and talking about the Bible, talking about the Word, talking about life, and we're still friends with those people today, and we don't get to see them nearly as much, but Carly, Chris, Richard, Mike, those guys were special. Those guys are still special to us, and they really made a big difference in me, because they were some of the first people that began to see me like she saw me. And she always saw me as something that I wasn't, especially at the time that she met me. But I thought it was just love blinding her eyes and my stunning good looks.
Yes.
But they began to see what she was seeing.
Right.
And so I thought, man, either she's really convincing, and she is, by the way, if you haven't experienced it, or maybe they can see something that I can't see myself.
Right.
And then the last person, and probably the single biggest influence on my life to date has been Pastor Tony. Pastor Tony McCoy has continuously called out greater things to me than I've seen in myself. He was the first person to say I could be a business administrator at a church years and years and years before I ever got that opportunity. He put me in front of a mic at a church when I told him I feel like I'm going to puke when I'm in front of a mic at a church. And he has continually helped me stretch and grow in ways that I couldn't possibly even think about. So
you know what's so many people think, just because he's our pastor, it's only spiritual, but he has just even our finances helped us, you know, because it's God's desire for people of God to not be in debt or not to just have enough, and that's something that Pastor has always preached to us and lived that life, that has encouraged us. So
I didn't come from a family with abundance. I mean, we were not, dirt poor like some people think, but we definitely never had the nicest, newest things, and my parents didn't know a ton about money. Didn't come from bankers or whatever, and so the things that I've learned about money, mostly I've learned on my own, and through life experience, and also through great books, through great authors like Dave Ramsey and others, and then in the last few years from Pastor Tony and some of his advice on just shifting your thinking in money and what it's supposed to be there for, and what God expects for you, and that you shouldn't be feeling guilty or like you shouldn't have something. It says that the world is God's and the fullness thereof, and that we are His children and therefore inheritors of everything. What does that mean? If He owns everything and I'm His child and supposed to inherit it, that means everything's mine. That's just like a complete. In the psychological world, they call that a paradigm shift. That's just like a completely different way to talk and think about money than I ever have.
Amen. I agree, Dion. So now we're going to get to a little bit more fun things.
It wasn't a page 2 when I previewed these questions.
So, what are some things that people may not know? They just see Stephen maybe doing the stewardship lesson or maybe doing a Bible study, but they may not know. We know that you like the U, but what are some other things that people may not know about you that you like, that you're interested in?
So I'm a big football fan. I cheer for the Bucks, and I cheer for the Miami Hurricanes and always have. I am not a giant NBA fan, but I am a huge Orlando Magic fan. I love comic books. I am that guy that all their friends call after the comic book movie when they don't understand something. Shout out to TJ and Isaiah, because they usually call me directly after a movie to be like, what happened? What does this mean? And I own a whole bunch of comic books, way more than I should, but maybe it's Jude's college fund one day.
Yep.
And I like video games, and I'm a big kid.
Yeah.
I like kid stuff.
Yeah. So video games, comic books,
movies, love movies.
Yeah, and he's a big fan of Star Wars as well.
Yeah.
We love oldie movies like Karate Kid and
now that Jude's double digits, we're starting to work our way through some classics. Yeah, you like
the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Lord of the Rings. Watershed moment in cinema.
So that brings me to my next question. So if you could have a superpower, what would you have? What superpower would you have? And which like superhero is your favorite?
Oh, geez. I would need time for this. Well, hands down, my favorite superhero is Spider-Man. Hands down. Always has been. Although they call me Captain America, friends of ours, we all named each other, and you didn't get to pick your own name. I would pick Spider-Man, but they named me Captain America. So I have a bunch of Captain America stuff, but my actual favorite character is Spider-Man. Favorite superpower? Wow. Superpower.
That's a toughie, huh?
Man. Probably super speed.
Okay.
Probably super speed.
Okay.
Because if you're fast enough, you can travel any distance that you want. You can run on water.
So
you
like
can
the
cross
Flash.
the world like the Flash.
Right.
You can travel back in time.
Right.
You can almost be in two places at once.
Okay.
You can vibrate through walls.
I did not know that. I don't know if you guys knew that. So
You vibrate so fast your molecules separate and you can pass through things.
So in closing, what are some goals that you have for your life as this is the 8th month of 2018? What are some things that maybe you have prayed about and that you want to make sure that those get accomplished between I know that we of course want to be debt free, which we probably will. Everything but the house will be paid, which is so huge for us. But in 2018, of course we want bigger, better for future, but for this year.
For this year, I want to finish paying off the Kia.
Right.
We have a couple of grand left on the Kia, and so we're gonna be working hard on that. I have like personal goals and I have work goals.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff going on at work. A lot of new positions that are either gonna be made in the future,
right.
possibly next budget year, as well as some positions that have to be filled right now. So about half my brain's on
right.
what has to be done right now at work. And then my goals, personally have to do with church and with my family. So Jude's getting ready to start football. I want him to have a successful football season.
Right.
I want him to enjoy that and feel supported in that. So we're going to spend some time doing that. I'm going to convince Evelyn that it's a great idea to finish dinner without... Now, this sounds like a silly goal to some people. But if she could finish dinner fully with everybody else,
it's so funny.
Instead of like 45 minutes after everybody's done and only after being bribed with a dessert,
yeah.
we would be making real progress. So that is a personal
Anybody that
goal
has
for the year.
like 5-year-old or under,
4 or 5-year-old
pretty
girl
much knows, or boy,
well, that's true,
and knows,
didn't he?
knows that.
So that's some goals. Also, I really, for Compass, for the Men at the Church, I would really like more interactivity throughout the month. I mean, we get together and do that monthly, and we have a great time. We learn a lot. We meet at the city gates, as Pastor likes to say. But if there was a way for in smaller groups for us to have more accountability with each other, more encouragement, it's sort of like when Pastor would tell us, you're coming to church once a week and expecting in 45 minutes or an hour me to pump you up enough to take on the world for a whole week before you get back here. That's not enough.
Right.
So we really need to encourage each other, men, more than we do. And then just personally, there's a couple of books that I have started and need to finish.
Right.
I'm terrible at starting things and not finishing, especially books.
But you're good. You're doing better because words are powerful.
I am. And then there's at least one Bible study that I would like to do with my wife, just the two of us. So I'm gonna make that happen.
That's 2018.
Before
so you
2018.
got 4 months left.
We can do it.
Right. So I have enjoyed this special time of a remarkable interview with my remarkable husband. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on the back porch.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Like I said, this is something that the Lord just put on my heart because I know that we all have our own story to tell. We are all able to make our mark. But we've got to be willing to share that, and sometimes it's kind of hard to share that because it's not always pretty. But through all the circumstances, God can make all things new, and He can make all things beautiful. And that's what He's done with Stephen. And we have breaking generational curses, you know, and we are going to continue to do that. So we pray that we are an encouragement to everyone that's watching, that will watch, and we want to make sure that you know that you are remarkable and that you are able to make your mark. Have a great day, and we will see you on Saturday.
Amen.
Alrighty, bye. God bless you.